From crazy tales across the newfound America to queens and interesting figures throughout history, we are back with another chapter of Unique History this week. And this article seems really interesting. I have a couple magazines that I've been flipping through for Unique History, and I caught the title of this one and I was like, I need to know more. I think I'm interested to hear this. So we will be looking at Artemisia Gentileschi, Renaissance Feminist. I like that idea that back in the, 1400s, 1500s, 1600s, around that age range or period range, that there was a feminist, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about this. So let us dive into another article from this time, the magazine called All About History. I picked this up at my work not too long ago. I've been reading through this all, and I figured this one would be an interesting article for us to read. So let us go through this here. So Artemisia Gentileschi, Renaissance Feminist. The acclaimed Baroque artist defied expectations and forged her own career in a male-dominated world. I love that. This is written by Jessica Legit. I don't know. I don't want to say legit, but maybe it is legit. Maybe Jessica is legit. Anyway, let's get the silly ramblings out of the way and begin reading this article. So she is a artist who defied expectations in a male-dominated world. I love stories like this, always. Breaking past expectations to forge your own path and be creative, and that's exactly what she did. So let's read through this here. The most celebrated female painter of the 17th century, Artemisia Gentileschi's art was internationally renowned and collected by notable patrons such as King Philip IV of Spain. Through her paintings, she highlighted the oppression and injustice women faced living in a patriarchal society, giving female figures the power and agency that had been ignored by other artists. I like that. That's definitely a good start to an article, just showing an alternative world where women actually had a say in life. Excellent. I like that. Gentileschi was born in Rome in 1593, the only daughter of Orazio Gentileschi, a painter, and Prudentia Montani. Her mother died when she was just 12 years old, and Gentileschi was sheltered by her father, who rarely allowed her to leave the house. That's one way to handle grief. Just the world has been so unkind, took your mother way too soon, and you're going to be under my wing. You're going to be under my watchful eye, and we're not going to let the world hurt you further, basically. I do like that sort of trope, I suppose, but kind of sad here. 12 years of age, losing a mom. That's really, really rough. Orazio taught his daughter how to paint, and she quickly showed more aptitude for it than her brothers. Her father's painting style was influenced by the work of his associate and friend, the renowned artist Caravaggio, known for his dynamic use of chiaroscuro. I think that's how you say that. I gotta tune into my Italian here a little bit. Chiaroscuro, the juxtaposition of light and dark. This, in turn, influenced Gentileschi's own style. In 1610, so that would be 17 years of age, she produced her earliest known signed painting, Susanna and the Elders, depicting a scene from the Book of Susanna. The painting illustrates an uncomfortable Susanna as she tries to avoid the lecherous attentions of two men while bathing. Many artists had painted the scene before Gentileschi, showing Susanna through the male gaze, either unaware of the lewd men or being flirtatious towards them. As for Gentileschi, she focused on Susanna's perspective and her obvious distress at being harassed by the men. The following year, 17-year-old Gentileschi was raped by the artist Agostino Tassi in her family home. Man, there's so much tragedy in some of these histories, like just her own family home. This artist probably came over for whatever reason and defiled her. Awful. Damn. So this Agostino Tassi was an acquaintance and colleague, An acquaintance and colleague of her father, Tassie had been hired to teach Gentileschi drawing and perspective. After the attack, Tassie, almost twice her age, promised to marry Gentileschi, and they had an affair. When he failed to deliver on his promise, an outraged Orazio pressed charges against Tassie for damaging his family's reputation, demanding that he either marry his daughter or pay for her dowry. A trial was held in March 1612, and it lasted for 7 months, gripping everyone in Rome. Thanks to surviving documentation of the trial, we know that the judge had Gentileschi tortured while providing her testimony to ensure that she was telling the truth. Jeez, this poor lady, we still experience this in today's society, where if a woman is, sexually abused or raped or anything like that, it's a question of what was she wearing? What was she doing? Was she drinking? Instead of believing the victim and understanding them. It's an awful way to look at the world. And so now they had to torture her to make sure she was telling the truth. Why couldn't they just listen to her? Why couldn't they just understand her? That makes me angry. Oh my god, it goes into the detail of the torture. I apologize. This is gonna get really dark and twisted, so I might put a little warning, I think, before this video is aired, in the description going, warning, sensitive topics include, and list them all after I read this. So I apologize if this gets too much for anyone. Pause the video, come back to a later date when you feel a little bit more ready to take on such a dark, heavy topic. So cords were wrapped and tightened around her fingers, a method that could have broken them, but Gentileschi was composed and resilient, maintaining her honesty. While undergoing torture in the courtroom, she defiantly faced Tassie and declared, "This is the ring that you gave me, and these are your promises." As part of her harrowing testimony, itself a rare example of a woman speaking out against oppression, Gentileschi stated that she scratched his face and pulled his hair while trying to defend herself. During the trial, Tassie claimed that Gentileschi was a loose woman, and at one point he even asserted he was already married, but this may have been a dubious attempt to avoid marrying Gentileschi. Tassie was eventually convicted of raping Gentileschi and sentenced to be exiled from Rome for 5 years. Yet, he did not leave the city, nor did he hide, and he was only exiled a year later after he committed another crime. So the man was actually charged for this, got away with staying in the city and not actually following the results or the judgment of the law, but then only because he committed a crime a year later did they finally act on his exile. Such bullshit. That's such a patriarchal society to be well, most of society probably believed him over her, but the judge had a rule figuratively because she was telling the truth despite torture and all this kind of stuff, and then he was lying through his teeth. God, that's so aggravating. Meanwhile, despite her victory, Gentileschi's reputation had been left in tatters, and she was widely seen in Rome as a promiscuous woman. Of course. Society. That's so aggravating. He gets away with living in Rome, in the city, for a whole year, escaping his judgment and escaping the pardon, the rule. Gets away with it, commits a crime later, and then has to act on the exile then. That's so aggravating. And then, of course, with her whole reputation is tattered because she's a woman. She spoke out against a man who was going to give her a life, and then now she's ruined. So stupid. The day after Tassie's sentence, that's the word I was looking for, sentence, not rule or judgment, sentence, there we go. So the day after Tassie's sentence was announced, she was married off to oh god, I gotta really think of the Italian here. Pierantonio Oh, that's a tricky one here, let me think. So the day after the sentence, interesting, she was married off to Pierantonio Stiatesi, a fellow artist. And the couple quickly relocated to Florence. Oh, that's a nice kind of smart move. Like, marry her off to someone who's like her, an artist, and send her out of Rome. Get her out of that center of attention, out of that reputation hell. Just get her to a different place. A smart move, a very quick move, though, to marry her off like the day after admitting all these horrible things that happened to her. But it's a move. You see this all the time in, like, Downton Abbey and Bridgerton and all the, like, scandal and high society. So yeah, I guess that's one way to handle, like, a harsh reputation, harsh situation altogether, really. So over the next few years, Gentileschi and her husband had 5 children together. Wow. 5 of them. 5 children altogether. Crazy. Although, sadly, only one of them, their daughter Prudentia, survived into adulthood. That's really sad. I can't imagine trying to raise children in a Renaissance society where life was not guaranteed. That's really sad, though. That would be so tragic to go through, like, this whole... Like, just look at her life in this one page of the article so far. Mother dies at the age of 12. She gets raped. Tries to have this proper relationship with the guy that raped her. Fell apart. Took him to court. Finally won against him in court. Found out that he never actually got to go through his sentence and started that a year later. And then was married off the next day after opening up about this. Had 5 children and only one lived into adulthood. What a life. Like, I feel for this painter, this artist, so much. That's so tragic. With her fresh start in Florence, Gentileschi built up her career. Surrounded by other artists and court painters in Florence, her creativity flourished, and she was able to develop her own art style away from her father's influence. That's kind of nice. Find yourself, discover yourself through this medium that you really love. That's a good way to do it. All this tragedy you left behind, and now you're here, and you're just finding yourself through what you love to do, art. A popular figure at the royal court, she established relationships with intellectuals and artists such as Cristofano Allori and Galileo. She knew Galileo. That's cool. And she enjoyed the patronage of the powerful and wealthy House of Medici. Oh, that's a really good Netflix series. Yeah, you should watch the Medici family. It's a wild one, but she actually had patronage there. That's crazy. I like history, guys. I hope you noticed that. I recognize Medici's name immediately upon reading this. Yeah, you know I know a lot about history. Gentileschi's popularity amongst the intellectual circles was even more remarkable, considering that she had received no formal education as a child and was essentially illiterate when she arrived in Florence. I like her more and more now. No formal education, couldn't read, but was still very intellectual, very smart, had this aptitude for art, a very valuable skill in this society and time period, and was well respected despite the lack of education. But we need more of that in our lives. We need more of that in today's society, I think. She's a great example of that. That despite not having that skill to read or write, she's still skilled and valuable. We need more of that. We really, really do. It has been argued that Gentileschi's success was partly due to the fact that she was unusual at a time when female professional painters were rare, and so she was more interesting to patrons. Also, she offered something different to the other male artists of her day. Like them, she painted mythical and biblical female protagonists, but her depictions were unique, portraying these women in a powerful and yet sympathetic light, rather than as passive objects. Gentileschi was also known for her self-portraits, and she created a series of them in Florence, with her image becoming popular among collectors. Only a few examples of these survive today, including her self-portrait as St. Catherine of Alexandria. That's cool. I like that. Portraying herself as like a famous queen in history. You slay, girl. Catherine was a female martyr who was tortured on a spiked wheel by Roman Emperor Maxentius. There we go. For refusing to renounce Christianity, with the wheel eventually breaking. In her painting, Gentileschi as Catherine holds the broken wheel to symbolize how she overcame her torture, likely in reference to the rape trial. Oh, that's a nice take to that. Just basically having this self-portrait there, and it's just stating that, like, I have been through literal hell almost, and torture, but I survived it, and having that symbol there, that symbolic imagery in her own self-portrait. I love it. I love this. Go for her. Go. You know what? Go, Artemisia. You got this. Fight society. That's what I feel like right now. Fight the system. So undoubtedly, one of Gentileschi's most iconic paintings is Judith slaying Holofernes. Ooh, languages are tricky in the Renaissance time, but Holofernes, I think is how I want to say it. It's Holofernes. So Holofernes probably, because of Greek language. Yeah, Holofernes probably. Judith is an Israeli. Why did they put is an Israeli? Nope. Israelites. Yeah, there we go. Judith is an Israelite who pretends to seduce Holofernes before decapitating him, and a woman whom Gentileschi painted more than once. That's interesting. Painting this Judith more than once. I wonder why. Tempting this Holofernes and decapitating him. Oh, I guess it's a symbol of, like, heck the patriarchy. You're a man, I'm not gonna let you seduce me, so yeah, okay. Let's pretend that that's what I'm doing right now, and come here. And I'll teach you what will happen if you try to do this again. Blech. Decapitation. It's an interesting way to take it. I have very interesting reactions, I guess, to this particular unique history. Anyway. Inspired, though, by Caravaggio's own version of the scene, her painting invokes intense realism, with Judith and her maidservants cutting off Holofernes' head, while blood spurts out of his neck. Oh, man. Oh, they have an image of this in the article. It's called, if you guys want to look up the image or look at it later, it's called Judith Slaying Holofernes, Gentileschi. And you can see her name in the title. So if you want to look up that painting, it's gruesome. It's like she's holding like a sword, basically, like an actual proper sword, and like holding him down and like decapitating him. It's dark. It's a cool photo, but dark. The painting is commonly seen as an expression of Gentileschi's anger and desire for revenge after she was raped, with Judith representing her and Holofernes representing Tassie. However, this view is debated, and in recent years, scholars have considered how the painting portrays a reversal of the traditional power dynamic between men and women. Here, Judith and her maidservants are actively in control, working together to kill a man who is physically stronger than them. It is just one of Gentileschi's many paintings that focus on strong, capable women and depict them through the female gaze. I think both of those reasons for painting a photo can exist, though, right? I think it could be either or both in most cases. So maybe there is a little bit of that, like, anger from Tassie, that, like, who did that to her and put her through that trial. But also just recognizing, like, that was still a man that had power over her, and this photo goes against that. So I think both of those reasons can exist for painting something so real and horrific. Yeah. Gentileschi's skill was recognized when she became the first woman to join the Accademia del Disegno, the Academy of the Arts of Drawing, in 1616. After 8 years in Florence, she returned to Rome in 1620 and separated from her husband. Gentileschi continued her career, briefly moving to Venice sometime between 1626 and 1627, before settling in Naples in 1630. So if you know the geography of Italy, she was all over Italy at this point. Rome is sort of down south a little bit, and then she went to Florence, which was a little more north or south. Anyway, she moved from Rome to Florence, then back up to Rome again, very north to Venice, and then all the way down south to Naples. She really got to see a lot of Italy in her life, which is really cool, actually. So yeah, she went to Naples in 1630. So she was born in 93. So she would have been 47, if my math is correct. 37? 37. There you go. I can math. Anyway, so she's 37 years old and lives in Naples now. Gentileschi remained in Naples for the rest of her life, aside from when she paid a visit to England in 1638 after receiving an invitation from King Charles I. Wow, that's a huge honor, to be invited to another country by a king. That's a huge honor. That's amazing. Her father, Orazio, had been based in England as the king's court painter since 1626, and it is thought that Gentileschi assisted her father in completing a ceiling painting at the Queen's house in Greenwich for Queen Henrietta Maria, titled An Allegory of Peace and the Arts. Oh, that's cute. Like father-daughter reuniting to do a piece for the King of England. Pretty cool, actually. Or I guess for the Queen, I suppose. Not the King, per se. Wow. And so if you want to look up that art, that like art piece, An Allegory of Peace and the Arts, that's what it's called, and it is beautiful. Beautiful. I never got to go to Greenwich when I was in England, but I would have loved to see that. If it's still like restored and there, it would be really cool to see that piece because it looks gorgeous. Gorgeous. It was during this stay in England that Gentileschi likely produced her self-portrait as the Allegory of Painting. In allegorical works, painting was traditionally personified as a woman. Gentileschi, as a female professional artist, was therefore in a unique position to depict herself as a painter at work and to identify herself as the personification of painting. It is a sophisticated piece and a testament to Gentileschi's abilities as an artist, as she was able to accurately paint herself in such a difficult pose. Interesting. They don't have an image of that piece here, unfortunately, but that would be kind of that's a really huge play on her career as an artist, that allegorical symbolism of painting being a woman, so really playing on her like womanhood, her femininity, and just portraying herself as that depiction of art. I really like that, actually. Orazio died in 1639, her father, and Gentileschi eventually returned to Naples sometime before the outbreak of the English Civil War in 1642. We don't know when she died, but the last known record of her is dated to 1654. It has been suggested that she may have died during the plague of 1656 that swept through Naples, but there is no evidence to prove this. Although Gentileschi was a celebrated artist in her lifetime, her work fell into obscurity after her death. Her paintings were often mistaken for those who'd worked with Caravaggio or even her father, and there was no real assessment or definition of her style for centuries. That's really sad. Again, that whole patriarchal society view, right, where this woman disappears is gone and all this artwork is left behind, and there's similarities to the mentor, Caravaggio, and her father, so they just assume this artwork was one of theirs. I don't like that. But at least centuries later, we now have that respect and honor for her as an artist. And actually, I sort of gave a nice little foreshadow there, because the next section begins. This changed in the 20th century when her work was finally reinterpreted and she was transformed into a proto-feminist icon for her depictions of women. However, for a long time, her art was frequently seen through her experience of rape, which has often overshadowed both her career as an artist and critical assessments of her work. Although the rape was undeniably a crucial part of Gentileschi's story, it is important to remember that she experienced many other things that also informed her work. For example, the loss of her mother and her children, as well as her fight to build a career as a female artist in a patriarchal society. Having said this, Gentileschi's powerful and dramatic paintings should not be considered only in terms of her biography or as revengeful catharsis for the injustice and hardships that she and many other women faced. Thankfully, in recent years, more people have been looking at Gentileschi in the way that she deserves, as an accomplished artist rather than just a victim. That's amazing. So final thoughts here. This is actually a nice little shorter episode today, so I hope you enjoy this kind of overview of her life, but I feel for her. She was a woman in a very typical patriarchal society and tried to rewrite how art was created by focusing on the female perspective instead of the male gaze or the patriarchal stance on women. And yeah, there's so much that happened to her that my heart just breaks for her. She had such a rough life. Mother passed away, the rape, the awful trial that she had to go through, being tortured, and then having to be sent away from her home to go to Florence, where she made her own home there, of course, with the children and her husband, but then lost like 4 of 5 kids. And that is a lot of tragedy to deal with in such a short time period. Like, basically, she was my age going through all of that. Like, 27 years of age, like around that 27 to 30 age range, going through all of that awful, really hard moments in life. Yet, still managed to turn it around, focused on her art, found her style, and received the highest honor that I think an artist could receive, which is being invited to another country by the king of that country to work on an art piece with her father, reunited at last. Created this beautiful ceiling piece for the Queen of England at that time, and had a prominent life. I'm really sad, though, to hear that after she passed away or disappeared after 1654, it looks like, that all of her artwork was just attributed to a man. That makes me angry. That's like, no, how dare you? She existed, there's record of her, and yet everyone for centuries just thought, oh yeah, it's probably Orazio's or Caravaggio's instead of hers, Gentileschi's artwork. But I'm really glad that now modern art historians basically are now giving her the credit she deserves. Sucks that it didn't happen when she was alive, or sucks that it didn't follow shortly after her death, but I think we can have some massive respect for what she's been through, the tragedy, and her art is truly beautiful. So if you need to look up some art from this article, look at Artemisia Gentileschi, and you can see some of her pieces there. It's gorgeous. She does this really, really well. But yeah, that is this week's episode of Artemisia Gentileschi. A little shorter of an episode. But I saw this article, I was captured by the title, so that's what's on the screen today, Artemisia Gentileschi, Renaissance Feminist. And then I was look at her artwork, because again, it's an artist, right? A Baroque artist in the Renaissance era, and I looked at just her art, and I was like, ooh, this has to be an episode. This is a really beautiful work. And here we are. So I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. It's amazing to find these pieces of history of women or figures in history that are just rewriting the rules, even if it only lasted for 30-40 years. Just being out there, being different, saying, you know what, screw this patriarchy, screw me being a passive queen or having to be very ladylike. Heck that, I'm gonna go do my own person, be my own person, do my own thing. And I have so much respect for that, because typically that was not seen a lot in history. So massive respect for that article today, and I hope you all enjoyed it. That concludes this chapter of Unique History, and I will look forward to seeing you guys back on Saturday this week for another article that takes us to World War I this time, so it'll be an interesting one. I wish you all well today, and take care. I will see you in another episode sometime soon. Bye bye.